we are losing community in ways that are incredibly bad for our mental health and our ability to flourish. And the one place where you can make kind of like a bubble, like a domed city, the one place you can do that is churches and synagogues. And so I think that's almost like the legacy that you have to maintain. You have to guard against the acid of this technological dissolution.
Earlier this week or last week, I sent our next guest a comment that I had seen from a teacher talking about the fact that if she takes up the phones away from the kids for a limited amount of time while they're working on a project or they're working on a test, parents start calling the office frantic by saying Johnny isn't responding to his texts. Has something gone wrong? And because it's exactly the sort of phenomena that we have talked about here. This is a guest that every time that we talk, I hear from tons of you about how helpful it is to think through these issues, especially when, there's not a lot of things. If you're a parent, if you're a young person starting out, you can ask your parents, how did you do it? If you're a parent and you're trying to figure out how to raise kids, you can ask your parents, is this something I should worry about? But when you're dealing with technology that is changing so fast and rapidly that another generation really didn't have anything like it, that's a different story. So that's why I wanted to have Jonathan Haidt back, who is the author of The Anxious Generation. Of course, he's a social psychologist. This book, along with his book, Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, both of them books that really changed and reset an entire cultural conversation, which you don't often see. John Haidt, thanks for being here with us today.
Russell, it's always a pleasure to talk.
I'm wondering, as I hear from more and more people who have interacted with your book, they're trying to figure out how to move forward. I'm wondering if since you wrote it, have you had occasion to rethink anything to the point of saying, I don't know that I would have been as insistent on this, or I think I may have downplayed that?
Yeah, it's the latter. Some critics accused me of being an alarmist, spreading a moral panic, but I was pretty careful in what I wrote, and I was really focused on what's the published literature and what can I say and what can we say about causality versus correlation. So I was pretty careful in writing the book. But what I've learned since the book came out is that the problem is so much bigger, so much more comprehensive in terms of taking over so much of childhood and life. And so the clearest example is this. I got interested in the topic because of the mental health issue. I saw that happening, as many of us professors did. I teach at NYU. I saw this happening in 2015, 2016. I wrote a book with Greg Lukianoff called The Coddling of the American Mind, attributing part of the rising depression, anxiety to overprotection. And at the time, we didn't know that social media was part of the problem, so we didn't really talk about it then. But I focused on the mental health, and it kept getting worse and worse. The mental health, especially of young women, is just the rates of depression and anxiety are up in the 35 to 40%. Self-harm rates have tripled. So something terrible is going wrong. And that's what I focused on in the book, and I linked that to social media particularly, although also just the digital childhood more generally. Now I realize that's actually not the biggest problem. There are many other problems, and the one that's even bigger, because it affects almost everybody, is attention fragmentation, the loss of the human ability to pay attention. So when we get interrupted, kids are getting hundreds and hundreds of notifications a day. They're on lots of group chats, and so they're constantly having text pop up, and they have to respond to a lot of them. So imagine going through your formative years. Your brain is rewiring. You're in puberty. You're going from child to adult. This is the period where around the world, adults are helping you, adults of your sex, not your parents. It's always like other men are helping boys make the transition. Other women are helping. This really sensitive period of puberty. Imagine if instead of learning things that are useful, learning your culture, learning how to be, it's just thousands and thousands of short videos, interruptions, swipes, likes, comments. And the net effect is that college students, even at elite schools like NYU's, college students have a lot more trouble reading, writing, doing anything that requires concentration. And this means that book reading is declining very, very rapidly. And just imagine the consequence to our culture if we lose books. Imagine if nobody reads books anymore and everything is just TikTok. So this is extremely dire. And of course, look, the mental health, I mean, you know, you've got kids killing themselves. This is as serious as could be. I don't want to downplay that. But I guess what I mean is even more widespread, even more comprehensive, because this is around the world and it's not just kids, it's also actually adults. We're losing the ability to think.
As somebody who teaches the Bible every week, I'm struck by how often something along the lines of listen, pay attention to what is being said is said throughout Scripture. I mean, even our Christmas carol, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," pay attention to what is being said.
Oye, oye, yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if, as we're looking at the way attention is fragmenting, I think you're right. That's one of the big questions I get from people when it comes to what I, as an evangelical, am trying to teach people to do, which is to read the Bible personally and to pray. And people are saying, I find I can't do it.
Oh, no.
And so, you know, obviously, as an atheist, you don't have perhaps counsel on how to pray, but I wonder you would have counsel on how to try to defragment attention.
Yeah. Wait, Russell, are you telling me, do you think, because look, as you said, even 2,000 years ago, the instruction is, hey, listen up, people. Right. It is hard to pay attention. It takes effort. Do you have reason to believe that people have more trouble praying now than they did 15 years ago?
Yes.
Because all this stuff starts around 20. Tell me, how do you know? What makes you think that?
The obstacle's different. 20 years ago, the main obstacle would have been everydayness. And so you would have to say to people, Frederick Buechner, an author in our tradition, listen to your life. You need to really pay attention to what's going on around you rather than just slipping into the everyday routine of life. Now it's more often the case that it's somebody who does want to. It's not that they're neglecting to do Bible reading and prayer. They really want to do that, and they see the need for that. And they're saying, I can't. Because when I start to try to read an extended passage of Scripture, or when I start to have a time of prayer, my mind is just going in 1,000 different directions. And one person, and this is a mature, long-time Christian, and somebody that, you know, if you were to meet this person, you would think this is a very impressive person, who says, I find myself, as I'm trying to read the Bible, in a state of agitation, because it's almost similar to not having a cigarette, because you don't know I feel like I don't know what's going on.
Wow. Okay, that is amazing, and that makes a lot of sense. So yes, even as an atheist, I do have some commentary on that as a psychologist, as a social psychologist. The cigarette analogy is really interesting. The key thing, so one thing to talk about here is dopamine. So dopamine is the most important neurotransmitter for motivation and action. Dopamine doesn't just give us a feeling of reward. It's not like you do something, you get dopamine, you say, that feels good. Dopamine is really more like, oh, that was great, let's do it again. Let's keep doing it, more. Dopamine motivates you. Without dopamine, you're going to sit on the couch and do nothing. So dopamine is really good stuff, but when you get too much of it too fast, your brain adapts, and it's called, it downregulates the neurons. That is, it makes the neurons less sensitive to dopamine, so that you need more dopamine to get back to normal. That's what addiction is. All addictions are that. Nicotine, gambling, alcohol, heroin, all addictions have that property. They change your dopamine system temporarily. It can be, but it takes a few weeks for you to detox to come back. Anna Lemke is a professor. She's a psychiatrist at Stanford. She has a great book, Dopamine Nation. And she says the 4 universal signs of withdrawal, that is of a, dopamine, it's like a drug addiction. When you don't get the drug, you get withdrawal. She says it's anxiety, sadness, irritability, and insomnia. I think those are the 4. And so many of your listeners, you have had this experience, you tell your kid, okay, that's it for the iPad. No, just, one more show, 1 more minute. So, okay, fine. All right, I'll give you your more minute. Then you take it away and they're irritable. They can't control themselves. They're maybe angry. That's 100% certain dopamine disruption. That means that their brain is adapted to this level of stimulation. And what that means, and this is especially a problem for boys, because our boys are even more hooked on these quick dopamine things than our girls are. What this means is that when a person whose dopamine system is disordered in that way, when they don't have the drug, they're non-functional. They're in withdrawal. It's painful. And the fastest cure for that is to go back on the drug. But the only long-term cure for it is to go off the drug. And so what I would say to your audience is, if you want to pray, if you want to be able to do anything that requires concentration or a long conversation or reading, you need to change your digital habits so that your phone is just a tool, not a slot machine. So when the iPhone first came out, it had a camera, it had music player, it had a phone, and it had a web browser. It was not addictive. There were no push notifications. There was no social media. And for me, my phone is still that. I never put social media on this, so I don't have any phone addiction problems. But my students all have multiple social media platforms on their phones, which means they're constantly being interrupted, constantly being given little hits of dopamine, and on a variable ratio reinforcement schedule where you sometimes get the reward and sometimes you don't. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you have to go screen free, but I'm saying you need to do an audit of the programs that are interrupting you and are harming your concentration, and those that are just a simple tool. You can use the flashlight, the mapping function, the calculator. Those are all fine. You can use your phone. But it's especially the short videos and the social media. That's what is just destroying people's ability to attend.
That's really interesting. I'm working on a project right now. I wonder what you think of this, where I'm interacting some with the anxious generation and arguing that what I'm seeing a lot is the bored generation. So one step beyond anxiety, where there's almost kind of a sense of being so overwhelmed that one just shuts down. And I have a lot of people who are saying to me, I just feel dead and bored. And when you spend some time talking to them, you realize it's because they've almost they have so many things clamoring for their attention that they've just kind of gone limp.
Well, I would interpret it slightly differently. Remember that famous line from Hamlet, where Hamlet, who is depressed, Hamlet says, "How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world." To me, Denmark is a dungeon, he says. And this is a classic symbol. This is called anhedonia, the inability to take pleasure. What that means is dopamine. What that means is the inability to have dopamine motivating you to do anything, to see the world as worthy of reaching out and grabbing, reaching out and interacting with. So our young people, and actually all of us, when you are spending about 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours a day is the average, what they're spending on their phones, 5 hours social media and about 3 to 6 hours of other stuff. And that's not counting screens at school. So when you're spending that much time being stimulated and getting some dopamine from those digital stimulations, when you're not on it, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me everything in the world. Everything is boring compared to my phone. So yes, they are, I wouldn't say they're the bored generation in that they are rarely bored. They're almost always watching videos. But they are easily bored. Like, for example, you and I remember looking out a car window on long rides, right?
Right.
Sometimes you just look out the car window and you watch the scenery go by and you think. And a lot of kids have never done that. because there's always an iPad in the car. And so we've trained our kids, unfortunately, or these devices have trained them, so that their threshold for being bored is so low that almost anytime they're off the screen, they're going to be bored. And that makes it very difficult to succeed, to develop, to learn, to grow.
I almost hesitate to ask you this because it feels like, in some ways, doing a presentation on drug addiction and having someone ask, well, which is a better kind of drug for me to do?
That's a good question. Go ahead, ask
I
away.
wonder, when it comes to these social media platforms, are there some that are worse than others in terms of the dopamine fix?
Absolutely. So the basic idea of social media, that wouldn't it be great if people were connected and they could easily talk to each other? There's nothing wrong with that. Now, okay, talking with strangers is kind of weird, especially for children. But so let's look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is fine. LinkedIn's a professional network. Now, I hear it's getting more, some more social media type features, but LinkedIn has been around for a long time. I never hear about LinkedIn addictions. It's practical, it's useful. Its business model doesn't require, I'm not sure what the business model is today, but they have a lot of ways of making money other than selling your attention. So LinkedIn is fine. There's no problem there. Pinterest is actually really good. They have good leadership. The CEO, Bill Reddy, he took down all social features for under 16. So you're not talking to strangers. You're not. So there are certainly ways of connecting that are fine, that are not addictive. The problem is the ones that were designed for addiction. They were literally designed to hook people and keep them on, because the business model developed originally by Facebook was, hey, let's give you this thing for free. We're not asking you for any money ever. What we want from you is your data and your attention, and we're going to sell your data, and we're going to use it to target advertisements at you. And so our real customers are the advertisers, not you. You're the product. You're not the customer. And so it's these companies, and preeminently it's Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. Those are the three really terrible ones. We know they're terrible because we have a lot of internal memos and reports and studies that they've done. These have come out either from whistleblowers or they've come out in the course of lawsuits. I think 35 state attorneys general are suing these companies. YouTube is complicated because I think YouTube, its business model isn't quite, you don't hear horror stories about YouTube the way you do about the others. A lot of bad stuff does happen on YouTube, but there's also so much good stuff. So YouTube is more complicated. But certainly Instagram, and lots of kids get addicted to YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts is terrible. It's no different from TikTok. Okay, but
why is that worse than a longer video?
Yeah. So okay, let's just do a little side thing. Actually, it's sort of actually the answer to your original question. Screens are not evil. You and I are on screens right now. It's not hurting us. It's helping us. Stories are good. Humans are storytelling animals. Long before we had writing, we told stories. We always tell stories. This is how we raise kids. So you don't want to keep your kids away from stories. Watching a story, and screens are good ways of presenting stories. So if you and your kids watch a movie, and it's a 2-hour movie, and you watch it over 2 days maybe, and you sit together, and maybe you eat while you're eating together, or you're talking a little bit, and you're talking. All that is great. There is no problem. There's no problem with movie night, watching long stories, especially if there's a moral message and there are people who have moral dilemmas. This is how kids learn. So don't be afraid of long stories, quality stories. At the opposite end, the worst kind of screen time is iPad time. The worst kind of screen time is one kid with a touchscreen device close to their face, not across the room, close to their face. And the touch screen, you get a stimulus response reward feedback loop. Television doesn't do that. Television isn't about dopamine primarily. Television is about immersion in a story. You lose yourself in a story if it's good television or movies. So that's all good. But if you give your kid your iPhone to shut him up, I'm busy, I'm making dinner, not now, we're in a restaurant, here, take my phone. If you could at least put on a long movie, that wouldn't be as terrible. But it's going to end up with TikTok or YouTube. Usually for little kids, they'll go to YouTube, and they're going to end up on YouTube Shorts. A short little thing, and people should watch these. People should watch TikTok, or they should watch YouTube Shorts. It's complete garbage. It's weird, horrible stuff. Yeah, there's some funny stuff in there, but it's weird, and it's not stories. It's just little bits of entertainment, some of which is disgusting, some of which is people getting hurt, some of which is people getting killed, having accidents and falling in ways that you know that they died. And so that's why I don't want people to say screens are bad. It's not about screens per se. It's about companies whose business model is to grab your attention or your kid's attention, never let go, monetize it, keep you on by giving you what the algorithm has computed is the most likely thing to keep you clicking. That's what you want to protect yourself and your kids from.
David Brooks and I were talking on the show about the comment that I heard that I was fascinated by from his colleague, Ezra Klein, who was talking to Chris Hayes. And he made the argument that maybe, without getting too hyper Marshall McLuhan here, but in terms of media changes, that we saw Twitter built on conflict and aggression, and then we saw the rise of Trump and so forth. But if you look at the campaign of Zoran Mamdani in New York, whatever you think of him politically, the way he did it was with TikTok type videos, which are more positive, talking to people about what their hopes are and so forth, their problems that they're dealing with and ways to solve them in that kind of framing. And so the suggestion was maybe TikTok, at least in that way, is moving us in a better direction. But you're arguing no, it's just as conflict driven.
Well, right. So the way to keep this straight is to recognize that each social media platform has its own profile of harms. So for Twitter, it's not that it's making girls depressed. For Twitter, it's that it's destroying democratic debate and it's turning everything into a fight. And so this is where Marshall McLuhan and Neil Postman, if they were alive today, they would be horrified. Television made everything entertainment, and that was bad enough for our politics. But once you get threaded comments and fighting in the comments, everything's a fight. Under every post, there's fighting. So Twitter, X, I think its primary damage is that. TikTok isn't primarily about fighting. TikTok is primarily about hooking people on short videos and keeping them on for many, many hours a day. It's the neutron bomb for attention fragmentation. It's the biggest destroyer of the human capacity to think. Now, Mamdani may be using it in ways that are not like that. Mamdani may be even educating. He certainly is putting out, I didn't see any of these videos I should have watched. So I would never, TikTok is let's see, pound for pound, Instagram, I think, is the biggest cause of teen girls' mental health problems. TikTok is the biggest cause of us getting stupider and unable to pay attention. And I would say that Snapchat is the biggest way that by which children are introduced to perverts and drug dealers and inappropriate contact with adults with disappearing messages and disappearing photos. So each one has its own profile of shame, I would say. So no, I never want to hear anyone say, well, maybe TikTok is leading us to a better place. Like, no, even if some stuff on it is positive, it is shattering the ability to think.
I heard you say somewhere, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when you look at Japan and South Korea, that these seem to be less negatively impacted in these ways, despite the fact that they're really high tech. I mean, if you're in Seoul and order room service, a robot's going to bring it to you. Do you think that there's something in those cultures that counteracts some of this?
Yeah. So I think what I've said on several podcasts and some of our blog posts said after Babel is when we graph out rates of teen mental illness, what we see all over the West, and especially in the English-speaking countries, is the same pattern. Things are pretty flat from the late 90s through about 2010, 2011. And then all of a sudden they go way up around 2012, 2013. They start like a hockey stick. They start to go up, up, up. And whereas a few years ago, we tried to find data from East Asia. We looked at Japan and Korea, and we weren't seeing that. We were seeing some increases, but we weren't seeing those hockey sticks. Now, that doesn't mean that things are okay there. They have extraordinarily high rates of suicide, of depression. In Korea, there's no childhood. All you do is work all day long. You come home from school, you go to cram school. So, no, whatever they're doing in Korea is brutal to childhood. But they've been that way for a long time. So it might be that it was already horrible, and then they get more on social media. It doesn't really change things. But more importantly, and this is probably what you heard me say, we see several signs that in communities where kids are embedded in networks of obligation to adults, they're insulated. And so here, the key finding is that in the United States, who was protected? If you look at liberals versus conservatives, it's liberals who go up like a hockey stick. Conservative kids are up. Everyone's doing worse. But conservative kids are more depressed, but it's not as much as for the liberal kids. Same thing for religion. There's a question on the Monitoring the Future survey, which is the big survey given to thousands and thousands of high school kids. And the statement is, religion is important in my family. Do you agree or disagree with a 5-point scale? And what we find when Zach Roush and I graphed this out is the kids who say 4 or 5, like, yes, I agree. Religion is important in my family. Those kids, they just go up a little over time. Whereas the kids who say, no, I disagree with that, they're the ones who are going up like a hockey stick. So it's basically religious conservatives were somewhat insulated from this. Their kids, I'm not saying they're not being harmed, but just in terms of depression, anxiety, they're not up very much. And we also see a little bit the same in Europe. European countries, most of them are up, but Eastern Europe, which is the one part that's gotten more religious in recent decades, their kids aren't going up in the same way. So I can't prove this, but this is what we suspect, is that kids who are rooted, they have, go to church on Sunday, say your prayers, clean the dishes, walk the dog, go visit your grandmother. Like those kids, when Instagram comes in, they don't get sucked away, they don't get washed away. But in more progressive secular families, there tends to be less control. Kids have more freedom of action. They can do what they want. And freedom is often very conducive to happiness and mental health. But in this case, it's like a tsunami came and those kids were not anchored. They got washed out to sea. So liberal girls are the most depressed and anxious people out there. And they are the ones who went up the most. The difference between liberals and conservatives used to be small. Conservatives have known to be a little happier than liberals for a long, long time, but the difference got much larger after 2012.
It seems that any kind of new technology has 2 immediate early adopters. One of them is porn, the other is religion. Yep. And so we have seen this with every single development. I wonder what you think about, CT has reported on this, Wall Street Journal did a big article about this, about AI companies that now provide to churches AI tools that are able to track your people, tell you how they're doing, tell you who hasn't been to church in a while because it immediately picks up their phone's presence, tells you on the basis of what Bible verses they're looking up, whether or not they're in trouble in terms of anxiety or depression or addiction or something like that, who needs a pastoral visit, who ought to be asked for a donation right now, and who shouldn't, and so forth. I wonder what you think about this.
Oh my God, what don't I think about this? My God. I mean, just to treat your parishioners like cattle going through the slaughterhouse and processing data on them. But let me start with something a little more realistic or focused here. So the first thing is, are you telling me that when people come into church, they often are going to the Bible on their own phones? Is that a common practice in churches?
Yes, it is now in larger churches. That's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that has to stop. There's no point doing anything else until you stop that. And here's the reason why. Imagine a kid in school. It's always been hard to pay attention in school. We all had trouble when we were young, but we did sometimes. And now imagine that you put a computer on a kid's desk. And we've done this. We did this around 2012, 2014. We put Chromebooks and tablets on most kids' desks. And you load it up with all kinds of great software that's supposed to teach them stuff. But what happens? They mostly are on TikTok, porn, and video games. It's a multifunction device. The teacher might say, please do this, but they're going to do 7 other things. The amount of time they spend on these devices learning is microscopic. It's almost all entertainment. Now, also, test scores are going down around the world since 2015. So the more we give people computers, the more we give kids computers to help them learn, the stupider they get. And that is probably why the people who made the technology in Silicon Valley, they send their kids to the Waldorf school. They choose that school because it has no technology. So now let's look at your parishioners coming into church. And you say, please open to Corinthians, whatever. And they do that. But they see that they have 4 notifications. And let me just check let me just check that. And we all know where that leads. And so it's the constant interruption. It's the constant distraction. It's the inability to go 20 minutes just solidly paying attention to one thing. That is going to do more to block spiritual development, more to block a good experience in church than, just knowing something from their phone about something else. So you've got to eliminate the distractions. The times I've been to Christian services and the music is so beautiful and powerful and the words are so uplifting, you need to kind of lose yourself in it. You need to kind of give yourself over to it, and then you can be swept away, and that's a mixture of awe and engagement and moral elevation, and all of that gets punctured. It disappears if you're going to check your notifications or your email during church. So that would be my main piece of advice. Get rid of all the technology. Have phone lockers when people walk into. Is that realistic? Could you do that? At church, you say, here's a giant bank of phone lockers or just a basket or whatever, or here's an envelope, put your name on it. Is there a way you could collect the phones at the door and have a phone-free service?
I doubt it.
Whoa.
And here's why.
Why?
And here's why. Because of the particular way that church life works in North America in 2025, there aren't parishes to which everybody in a particular place goes. So they're choosing where they go. So there's not as much of a power to ask for that without somebody saying, I think that's kind of authoritarian and legalistic. I mean, an example of this would be in the education space. I heard from a professor not long ago who doesn't allow laptops in the classroom at all, or phones.
Nor do I.
And he says, well, the problem is the kids become so outraged about that they go give him bad reviews on Rate My Professor. He said, he was close to retirement, so he didn't care. Yeah. But he said, there is a sense in which even the classroom is a kind of free enterprise sort of endeavor, and church life can be too.
Okay, so Russell, 7 years ago, I think that would have been a reasonable thing to say, and it would have been reasonable for students to object to you taking the laptops away. But I've been saying no laptops, no screens of any kind in my classes at NYU since 2021 or 2022. And what I do is, first of all, they understand it. Like, they know that they're shopping, they're texting, they're doing all sorts. They know that these things are distracting them. Second, I explain it very much. I show the evidence. I explain, here's why we have this policy. And what I find year after year, at least when I first started doing it, some objected at first, but a few weeks in, they generally see like, wow, this is a lot better. I'm actually, I'm paying a lot of money to come to this business school, and I'm actually learning. So things have really changed in the last few years. Everyone sees the damage now. So I'm guessing that if a bold, creative minister, pastor were to explain the reasons for this and to say, here's what we've been losing, and here's what we're going to try, and here's why we're going to do it. And maybe you just offer one phone-free service a week and see if people like that. And my guess is they're going to love it. But don't accept the idea that the people are going to hate it. That's what kept us stuck in this trap until last year. When my book came out, the greatest obstacle I faced wasn't people saying I was wrong. It was people saying, yeah, you're too late. Too late. Yeah. This is already everywhere. We can't, this is the way of the future. What are you going to do? Put toothpaste back in the tube? Well, yeah, if your kid's life depends on it, I'd find a way to put toothpaste back in the tube. So I really urge, if there's anyone here in a leadership position in a church, I urge you to try it. Try offering a totally phone-free service. Talk with the parishioners, don't just impose it on them. But you're going to find most people are wrestling with this and they may welcome it. And if it goes well, it's going to attract a lot of others. Until you get the digital habits right, if everyone's distracted by their phones, there's really no point in talking about anything else.
Well, one of the arguments, very similar to what you just said, one of the arguments, particularly for AI and for churches and other religious organizations to early adopt all kinds of AI platforms, is because the toothpaste is out of the tube. And what people who are adopting these things will say is it's kind of like, you're 1983 and you're talking about getting rid of all your nuclear weapons. Well, yeah, but if the Soviet Union doesn't, then it doesn't. What about the fact that we are moving into an AI era? This is going to be, and if we're the only place that isn't utilizing this, we're going to be left behind.
Wait, are you saying if one church community doesn't use it, they're going to be left behind? Because
well, I'm saying if churches generally, if you have every other force in society harnessing the power of AI and this sort of algorithmic kind of way of telling what people's behavior will be, that will be left trying to figure out what to do. And so the argument is we've always been printing press. We were right there. Television, radio, we were right there. If we don't with this, we're going to be just kind of surrendering people to something that will be controlled by other people.
Okay, so AI is many things. And when it comes to using ChatGPT, when it first came out, we professors, we all thought, oh, that's cheating. If we catch a student using it, they're cheating, they're going to get an F. But now it's clear everyone's using it, and we're using it. It's incredibly useful. So I use it every day, multiple times, to answer questions quickly. I'm not saying, if you're a pastor writing a sermon and you want some help to understand that, I'm not saying don't use AI to help write your sermon. Of course, it'd be terrible if you just said, here, write the sermon for me. But to use it as a research tool is fine. Now, the problem is, and we're seeing this in research already, there's a study when students were asked to read some questions and then write essays about them. And one group, they were allowed to Google things, and the other group, they're allowed to use ChatGPT. The people who just wrote, they learned the most about these passages and they wrote the best. The second was those who used Google because they had to still do some thinking. And the people who learned the least were the people who used ChatGPT to answer the question. You don't learn anything when you use ChatGPT. So if you're using it as a tool to create a better product for your parishioners, I think that's probably going to be okay. But if you are in some way altering the experience of a human-to-human connection in a shared space, a sacred space, a beautiful space with a community that goes back thousands of years, in a community of, that is a very special thing that you create over time. And if you're just going to say, well, let's practically speaking, let's put AI in here, and let's monitor it, you're going to kill the humanism of it. You're going to kill the spirit of it. So I would be very wary. The history of these digital innovations is that we're promised a lot, and they generally backfire. Now, that wasn't true until recently. The early internet was incredible, mind-blowing. So that's why we got fooled, because the early stuff, and then the original iPhone was amazing, and then Uber and all these incredible apps. So the technology used to be really magical. But as we moved into heavy social media and AI, I think we're going to find a lot more backfire effects. AI in particular, I just want to say AI is essentially like alien intelligence coming to Earth. This is a kind of intelligence. It's debated now whether it's a kind of consciousness or whether it's truly intelligence. But in 2 years, I think it won't be debated.
You think there will be consciousness?
There'll be something like consciousness. It won't be like human consciousness because they're not made of neurons. But if we are an aggregation of 10 billion neurons. We put them all together, you get consciousness. These are aggregations of billions of transformer cells. You put them together and you get something that they don't understand. They can't explain why this works, but something comes out of it. So my point is, this is a kind of intelligence which we don't understand. The people who made it don't understand it. They don't know how it thinks. And we're saying to our kids, here, go have conversations with it. Here, go make a girlfriend. Give her whatever beautiful face and body you want. Make her talk slutty. Make her talk funny. Whatever you want. Here's your perfect girlfriend or boyfriend. And we already have had kids kill themselves because of these relationships. So I think we should look at AI. Of course, it's like we've just been giving fire and the nuclear bomb at the same time. Like, yeah, we're going to use them, but let's use them really, really carefully, because a lot of people are going to get hurt and a lot of terrible things could happen.
I'm noticing, especially with ChatGPT, the other platforms, primarily we see the problems most sharply with adolescents and young adults. ChatGPT, I'm seeing it with middle-aged people more than almost anyone else, because of the asking ChatGPT, am I doing the right thing in this moral decision or so forth? And it's almost always going to tell you yes.
Yes, you are. It's supportive. It's sycophantic. Exactly. Just what humanity needs, someone to tell you you're always right. So that's right. That's a good example. These are systemic changes in how we relate to each other, in how we think, and how we think about ourselves. And they're coming at us so fast that we will never adapt. It takes decades to adapt to these technological changes. But now that they're happening every couple of years, we're going to be off balance forever and ever, it looks like.
You seem more optimistic than you did last time I talked to you. I wonder if you're seeing, I see it, where people are actually, they're reading Anxious Generation, they're reading your stuff, they're listening to you, and they're saying, oh, we actually can do something here. And are starting to, even if they don't know what to do, they're kind of feeling around to
No, that's right. I am much more optimistic. Now, I'm more pessimistic about AI now that we know more about it. I'm very worried about what's going to happen with that. But the fact that so much has happened with social media tells me that we actually can act. There was just an article in Politico today saying the biggest bipartisan success story of the last decade, and really the only one, is getting phones out of schools. That it really was led by red state governors and blue state governors. I mean, it really has been totally bipartisan. And even though Congress has done nothing at all ever to protect children, but the states are really acting, and it's in a bipartisan way. And it's happening around the world. Australia's raising the age to 16. Brazil, I was just there a few months ago. Brazil banned, they got a bill passed just like 6 months after my book came out. Mothers sprang into action, lobbied for this, got a bill passed. Brazilian schools started in February in the Southern Hemisphere. All schools in Brazil are phone free, the whole country. So amazing things are happening because we were stuck in a collective action problem. Everybody thought, as you or your friends did, like, oh, well, what are you going to do? If everybody uses it, you have to use it. Like, no. You don't. If everybody's using something that's hurting our kids, we don't have to keep using it, but we have to do it together. And I think we need to do the same thing here with AI and with ed tech. We need to say these technologies are untested. So far, they mostly seem harmful to children. So let's not put them into elementary school at all. Let's not use AI in elementary school at all. Let's, even ed tech, let's go back to pencil and paper, especially in elementary school, until we understand these things better. So I'm actually amazingly optimistic. Oh, Sweden's a great example. They were one of the first countries to go all digital in their schools. They thought it was so modern and progressive. They quickly realized it's hurting the kids. They're not learning to read and write. So Sweden has rolled it back. Sweden's going back to paper and pencil. So I'm incredibly optimistic that across our political divisions and around the world, parents, and especially mothers, are really driving these reforms to restore a play-based childhood, to restore a real-world childhood.
Last question for you. Other than keeping the phones away for the scripture reading and so forth in church, what one word of advice would you have for pastors or church leaders, particularly, when it comes to helping people to retain a connection of what it means to be human as we move into the next several years?
I guess the word would be community, because when we're each on our own with our devices, it's a willpower problem, and a lot of us aren't equal to the task. And what we've most lost, one of the most devastating losses to the country, is the loss of community. Derek Thompson had a brilliant Atlantic article last year called the what is it, the Lonely Century, I think it's called. We are losing community in ways that are incredibly bad for our mental health and our ability to flourish. The Surgeon General the last Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, was brilliant on this. And what I'm seeing is that, it's in a sense, it's like, imagine if all the oxygen was like, if 5% of the oxygen was removed from the earth every year, we wouldn't quite notice it, but we gradually find ourselves like not being able to breathe. And the one place where you can make kind of like a bubble, like a domed city, the one place you can do that is churches and synagogues. And I can tell you, I'm Jewish. Jewish organizations, Jewish schools, of course, the Jews have a built-in advantage because we have Shabbat. There is one day, not that I've honored Shabbat, but religious Jews for 25 hours, no devices, no phones, no technology, just community. You're together. The kids are playing, the adults are talking, they're reading, they're singing. So Jewish communities actually jumped on the phone-free schools. A lot of them got the phones out right away, a year and a half ago, and they're thriving because of it. So I'm saddened to hear that Christians think that they can't get phones out of schools, but I think you are
out of churches. I've seen it happening in schools a lot, in Christian schools.
Yes, out of churches, right. But you are the preeminent place. Where is their social capital in this country? Where is their communities of trust? It's the biggest repository is Christian churches, church communities. And so I think that's almost like the legacy that you have to maintain. You have to guard against the acid of this technological dissolution. So that'd be my word to you, would be community. And that's going to go hand in hand with reducing the device use, especially in church.
Jonathan Haidt, author of The Anxious Generation. It is always thought-provoking to talk to you. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Russell. If I could just end by saying, I hope listeners will go to anxiousgeneration.com for a lot more information. I hope they'll go to afterbabel.com. That's my Substack where I put out research on this. And I hope that they will buy the new book that we have coming out for children. It's called The Amazing Generation. It's written for 7 to 12-year-olds, coming out December 30th. So if you're struggling with this and you've got kids in that age range, I hope you'll consider getting them The Amazing Generation.
And we will put links to all of those in the show notes. You can look at them and check out those things out. Jonathan Haidt, thanks again.
Thank you, Russell.